right, guys, welcome to the last video of lesson 7. We're going to do number 3 and 4 on page 64, and then we're going to do a little wrap up. Okay, so when we're rounding decimals, we are rounding this one to the nearest tenth, right? So the nearest tenth. So we're going to start by finding our tenths in 27 and 96 hundredths. Okay, so 27 and 96 hundredths is 279 tenths. Remember, I always tell you on the place value chart, you can just name it by your last number. So 279 tenths. So that's what we're going to put here because that's our starting place. 279 tenths. You can also write it as 27 and 9/10. Make sure you're writing this in your book. Okay, that's how you start. Now you're going to say to yourself, what's 1/10 more? And 1/10 more you're going to write up here at the top. That would be 280 tenths. Oh my goodness, sorry about that. 200, let me erase that. That's a little messy, isn't it? Okay, so 280 tenths, also known as 28 and 0/10. So you noticed that we went from 27 and 9/10 up to 28. So we're going to the next whole number. And then we ask ourselves, what's in between, right? So we're going to go one more digit out. 2, 7, 9 tenths, because we still want to write it in tenths, and 5 hundredths, right? We're going to go 5. We always go 5 more in the middle here, and that's the same as 27 and 9/10. We still have our 9/10, and now we have 5 hundredths. Okay, so 95 hundredths. All right, so our number we started with was 27 and 96 hundredths. You see our little estimation sign there, and we have to place that. So 27 and 96 is going to be one above 27 and 95 hundredths, right? So are we going to go closer to 28, or is it closer to 27? 9. Is it closer to 280 or is it closer to 279? All right, so let's think about it as tenths. 279 tenths and 6 hundredths. You're right, it is closer to 280 or 28. So we're going to write it in standard form. Standard form is like a regular number. So it would be 28. You could put 28 and 0/10 if you want, but as you know, zeros mean nothing, so you can leave that blank. All right, so if you're struggling with that, you can pause the video and write it down, ask for help, or rewind. All right, so let's go on to our next question, which is number 4. And number 4 is round 9 and 492 thousandths to the nearest hundredth. So we have to think, what are we rounding to? We're rounding to the nearest hundredth. So now we're going to draw our own vertical number line. Please make sure it's vertical because then it's a little easier to see what is higher and what is lower, right? We're going to place our first number only to the hundredths place, right? So we're only going to say 9 and 49 hundredths. We're going to leave the 2 off because we're rounding, right? So we're going to look only at the hundredths place here because we're rounding to the nearest hundredth. All right, this is also known as 949 hundredths, okay? Very good. Then we're going to ask ourselves, and we're going to do the same process every time. Now we're going to ask ourselves, what's 100th more? And that's what's going to go at the top. So 100th more would be 9 and 50 hundredths, right? You might be saying that's also 5/10. Well, yes, 50 hundredths and 5/10 are the same thing. So that would be 950 hundredths, right? Okay, and then we ask ourselves, what's halfway between 940 hundredths and 949 hundredths and 950 hundredths? That would be 949, and I'll put the decimal in there so the decimal ones are all together, and 5, right? So this is going to be halfway between these two, all right? And as hundredths, it would be 949 hundredths and 5 thousandths. Okay, please make sure that you're writing this down in your book. Now we're going to look, where does our number land? 9 and 492 thousandths. Notice when we first wrote it, we took off the 2 because we're going to the hundredths place. So we're just looking at the hundredths place. But now we're looking at our actual number, and we're saying this actual number comes here because it's halfway between 9 and 49 hundredths and 9 and 495 thousandths, right? 4 and 902 thousandths. So it's going to be not halfway, but just about here, right? Now we ask ourselves, which one is it closer to? Is it closer to the top or is it closer to the bottom? And hopefully you're noticing that it is closer to the bottom. So we would round 9 and 492 thousandths to the closest hundredth, 9 and 49 hundredths. Okay? All right. Thank you for your hard work. Just a couple more things we want to talk about, which is the steps of what you do. So when you're rounding to the nearest 1, right? Rounding to the nearest 1, you need to think about what's one more and what's the number in between, right? The halfway point. Halfway between 1 and 2 would be 1 and 5/10. So you're going to the next decimal place. What about when you're rounding to the nearest tenth? Your tenths, 1/10 more, and halfway between, which would be hundredths, right? So if we're looking at 1/10 and 2/10, it would be 1/10 and then 15 hundredths, 0.15, and then 2/10. Same thing when you're going to the nearest hundredths, just like on the screen right here. We're going to go over to the thousandths place to get our halfway in between. Okay, so if in the beginning Adesh told his friends that he could hold the handstand for 10 seconds, and we said possibly 9 and 7/10, what other numbers could it have been that was on his stopwatch besides 9 and 7/10? What else could have been on his stopwatch? Thinking about it. 9 and 8/10, 9 and 6/10, 9 and 5/10 is also going to be closer to 10, or any of your hundredths or thousandths in between. Okay, think about that and go ahead and do your must-dos. Nice work, everybody. Aloha.